Everyone, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the TRPA Operations and Governments Committee to order. The date is Wednesday, May 24th, 2023, and the time is 8:35. We're here at the TRPA office on Kingsbury. First item on the agenda is the roll call to determine a quorum. Maria?
Miss Alding,
Here?
Mr. DeCara.
Here.
Miss Dis.
Here.
Mr. Honigman,
Here.
Miss Lane.
I'm here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
All right, thank you. We'll now go to the rules for the day. For members of the public who are joining us remotely to observe the meeting, go to trpa.gov. Under the calendar header, click on Governing Board Hybrid Meeting for May 24th, 2023. There you will find a link to the public webinar hosted on Zoom. To address committee members directly with your comments, raise your hand in Zoom by clicking Raise Hand at the bottom of your screen at the appropriate agenda item. With your hand raised, you will be unmuted by TRPA staff and have 3 minutes to address the committee. If you use the dial-in numbers to join us by telephone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand and be unmuted. To remote committee members, and I guess we have one remote committee member, Jessica. Although I'm sure you know the rules by heart. If you wish to speak, you can also raise your hand in Zoom. You will find the hand icon on the bottom of your screen. Remote committee members may not use the chat box to make any comments or to have sidebar conversations. Please, everyone, remember to mute your mic unless speaking to cut down on background noise. Finally, I would like to ask that all remote members turn on their cameras if they are able to do so. Members of the public who have joined us in person, please raise your hand at the appropriate time for public comment, and you will be called to the front to speak. Committee members who are attending in person, please raise your hand if you wish to comment and speak clearly into the microphone in front of you. If you are viewing the webinar on a personal computer, please ensure that your microphone and speakers are turned off to prevent audio feedback into the room. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Chris, any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Madam Chair.
Okay, then we will deem the agenda approved as posted. We are now on agenda item number 2, approval of minutes. You have a set of minutes from March 22nd, 2023 on page 7 of your packets. Does any member of the committee wish to make any changes? Okay, I had a couple of clerical changes. Yeah, kind of predictable. Even though our folks do a wonderful job. That has to be one of the most difficult tasks, I think, is transcribing these minutes. So I want to thank you for all your hard work.
Well, the problem for me, Madam Chair, is I read the minutes and I didn't find anything.
Is that right? Okay, maybe it's just I'm trying to make my comments seem more, understandable. So I'm making changes just to make myself look better. I did have a few, as I noted, a few clerical changes that I passed on to Maria for inclusion in the final approved minutes. So with that, is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. That moves us to agenda item number 3, which is a recommendation to approve the April financials. Information on this item can be found on page 89 of your packet. Chris.
For the record, Chris Kyler, Finance Director for the agency. If I could have the next chart, please. Just to update everybody on where we are with the Nevada budget. Session is still going on, but it closes in like less than 2 weeks now. The TRPA budgets have all closed, and it's just awaiting final approval at the state level of the budget negotiations between the governor's office and the legislature. In terms of what we've requested for TRPA, all that's been fully funded. And down at the bottom of this chart, I've listed out all the individual items we asked for in addition to our baseline. This does bring us up to the full 1/3, 2/3 ratio between the two states, especially since we will not be getting any additional monies from California. Our historic budget is intact in California, but there's no new ads there at this time. Wait, have the next chart, please. I'm not going to dwell too much on this chart because a lot of it's covered in the next chart, which relates to budget performance. We do have positive balances in the state and local column. That's normal because we get the state funding at the beginning of the year and then spend it down during the course of the year. The one concern I have with monthly financials, and we'll kind of address them in both charts, is that our planning fees have been running just absolute high for almost 3 years now, a little over 3.5 years now. And even through the first half of this fiscal year, they're running high. But since January, they've kind of tailed off a little bit. Not panic mode or anything like that. but it's going to factor into what we do in terms of our projections for next year's budget. The other thing to keep in mind is there are some major projects that are floating around, and if some of those come in, that might have a major impact on our planning revenues in a positive manner. If I can go to the next chart, please. This is again against the budget, and everything's pretty much on track about where we should be on compensation. Contracts always lag a lot. It's actually interesting. It takes so much difficulty to get invoices from universities and people like that, but eventually they bill us. We wind up paying FY23 bills in August and September, but they'll eventually bill us. Okay, if I could have the next chart. I promised you a quarterly report on mitigation funds. So this is what we didn't do last month because we didn't have a meeting. We have brought in 2.7 million in mitigation funds so far this year. We've dispersed 3.5 million. The biggest chunk of that went to NDSL for the excess coverage. We have not dispersed any of the money you've approved for the CTC project. That project is still in process. And they don't expect closure on that for a couple of months yet. So that one will probably slip out of this fiscal year and into next fiscal year. These numbers do hit our eventual financial statements because of the GASB 84 change that made them revenue and expenses against our things. But I don't normally report them in our monthly financials. Our monthly financials are more pro forma and don't include the mitigation funds.
In the CTC, I'm sorry, Chris, you're referring to the CTC project is the acquisition of the old Motel 6 property.
Yes,
right?
that one's on hold.
Okay.
Well, it's not on hold. It's just, it's
They're
going to
negotiating.
be a longer path to closing on it, shall we say.
There are multiple interested buyers, right?
Yeah, they have, as I understand, they have 4 bids,
Okay.
including CTC's bid, and the family that owns the property is trying to decide what they're doing.
Okay.
And families being family, that might not be a simple process.
Understood.
Okay, if I could have the next chart, please. Again, I'm showing the 2 cash flows. The one on the left shows everything comparing prior years, and you can see that we're mapping right down with all our prior years, the normal decline over the rest of the year. And the one on the right shows the impact of the mitigation funds. If the CTC project came in this year, it'd be a more dramatic graph on there. And again, that's all money in the bank, so it's not like it really hurts us or anything like that. So.
Thank you for creating that graph. I think that will be helpful in the future, just to let us know really what we should be worried about and not when those things take a huge dive for a good reason, like we're buying property. So thanks.
And I forgot, do I have another chart? Okay, but that's it. I'll happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Very straightforward. Any member of the committee have any comments or questions at this point?
I have
Yes,
just one. You spoke last time we met about the economic environment on the national level. And I'm wondering how you're feeling about that now. And you gave a great summary of where our assets are and that they're fairly secure or very secure, but just kind of curious what you're thinking now.
Are you talking about the treasurer's report?
Yes.
That's the next item on the agenda.
Okay.
Take it up then.
All right, sounds good. All right.
You have to vote on this before I'll talk to you.
Yeah.
about it. It'll
That's
hold you
right. First thing
black
first.
day with that.
Jessica.
Well, I just wanted to say congratulations to the team on the Nevada budget. That's really a very big deal. And I know how hard everyone worked with the governor's office to get that budget fully funded. So I just wanted to say congratulations to everyone, and also that I am standing outside. So I will see you all in a couple minutes.
Okay, sounds good. All right, see you in a bit. All right. Yes, congratulations to everyone who was involved in attending those meetings, including members of our governing board. All right. So if there are no further questions by members of the committee, and we will move on to public comment on this item. If any member of the public wishes to address the Operation and Governance Committee on this agenda item, please raise your hand now, either in person or by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you will be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Are there any members in the audience? No. Steve, you don't wish to make any comments on this item? Okay. Then we will move on to our virtual members. Any virtual members wishing to make comments on this item?
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to comment on this item.
Thank you. All right. Then we will close public comment, and I'll entertain a motion to recommend to the governing board to approve the April financials.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion. Any comments on the question? All those in favor? Well, no, we have to do a roll call. I'm sorry. To expedite things here. All right. Maria, will you please call the roll?
Mr. DeCara. Mr. Honigman. Ms. Dis,
Aye.
Ms. Lane,
Aye.
Ms. Aldine.
Yes,
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
thank you. All right, that brings us to agenda item number 4, which is a recommendation to approve the release of Placer County Water Quality Mitigation Funds in the amount of $500,000. The Kings Beach Water Quality Improvement Project. Information on this item can be found on page 111 of your packet. And we will turn this over to Tracy Campbell.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Tracy Campbell, EA with the EIP department. This request is from Placer County. That seems really loud. And for $500,000 in water quality funds for the Kings Beach Watershed Improvement Project. It's a multi-phase project spanning 15 plus years, probably closer to 20. And this phase of the project, a final phase, is looking at lower Seacline area. Specifically the 2 roads, lower Seacline and upper Brockway Vista Avenue, which are kind of dirt roads right now. And you can see that in that picture. And there's one on the next slide I'm going to show you too. And so the project will stabilize the shoulders, formalize parking, obviously pave those roads, and install some water quality improvements that will hopefully reduce some of that sediment heading to the lake. You can see how close the roads are to the lake. The $500,000 will join an $800,000 grant from the Forest Service. Permits are all in place, planning is complete, and the project's ready to go. We should just note, you probably received yesterday, Maria sent it out. We did get one public comment letter from, let me get the right name, North Tahoe Business Association to request that the item be removed from consent for further discussion. So you've got a copy of that. And we're joined online by Greg Keaveney, project engineer for this project, and he can answer any questions you might have. So with that, I'll pass it back.
Thank you. I'm sorry, who is the gentleman from Placer County?
Greg Keaveney.
Greg. I don't see Greg listed as being online.
He was on, so we lost him.
He's there.
Oh, he is there.
He is there. Okay. I just have to scroll down again. There he is. All right. Greg, good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. If you could please address some of the concerns contained in this communication we received from the North Tahoe, the NTBA Economic Vitality Committee regarding the parking that is incorporated as one of the funded improvements in this project. That would be wonderful.
Sure. Where would you like me to begin? I mean,
Greg, I think at least based on my review of the letter, they were concerned, they indicate that there was a lack of public outreach. They're concerned about, you know, in the age of trying to minimize parking and encourage communities to be more pedestrian friendly, that the paving that's incorporated into this project and being funded with this money is kind of inconsistent with that objective. So if you could just address that concern, I would appreciate it. One, public involvement, the extent of public involvement, and the importance in your mind of paving these dirt areas as part of a water quality improvement project.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I would like to ask if Stephanie Holloway is on from the county. Does anyone see her on? She was gonna support me in this endeavor, so I'm not sure if she has joined, but she would probably be better to address those questions. However, I'm happy to say that we have had extensive public involvement in this project that's gone back all the way to pre-planning days of Kings Beach. And this project has spun out of the bigger Kings Beach Water Quality Project. So recently in the last few years, we've had a public meeting as recently as December and done numerous design revisions based on public involvement with both groups such as the one that wrote this letter, the NTBA Economic Vitality Committee, and the public, which resides along those streets. being Brockway Vista West. So we feel that we have done due diligence in public outreach and have spent substantial public funds in achieving this design, and went out to bid for construction last year. Subsequently re-met with these agencies and individuals and have come to what we feel is a compromise for everyone involved.
So in your opinion, this project does meet the spirit and the letter of the Tahoe Basin, what was the acronym, too many acronyms, the TBAP and other applicable codes?
In my opinion, yes, the Basin Area Plan is met through our endeavor.
Okay, thank you. Any members of the committee have any comments or questions regarding this request for the release of these funds? Okay, all right. In that case, we will go on to public comment on this item. If any member of the public wishes to address the Operations and Governance Committee on this agenda item, please raise your hand now, either in person or by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you will be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Any members of the public? Obviously, are there any members of the public in the audience wishing to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to those who might be. Oh, yes. Oh, Cindy. Yes. Okay. I guess you qualify as a member of the public.
Well, for right now. I believe Stephanie Holloway is planning to be here at the governing board meeting and was going to address more of the parking management strategies and other approaches that will deal with, I think, some of the concerns expressed in the letter. So you may want to put off action by this committee. As you suggested, you could just table this and take it to the governing board and have a more thorough discussion there.
So Cindy,
I'm not prepared to represent the county on all the efforts that have gone into the public outreach, but I know that she is prepared to do that.
so are you prepared to pull this from the consent
Sure.
calendar?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Cindy. I appreciate that. Okay. Any members of the public joining us virtually who might like to comment on this item? Catherine?
Madam Chair, we have one hand raised. Alyssa Riley.
Okay.
Alyssa, if you unmute, you can address the committee.
Good morning, Alyssa.
Good morning. My name is Alyssa Riley, and I am the Executive Director of the North Tahoe Business Association. And I did want to follow up on our letter submitted yesterday from our Economic Vitality Committee in asking that consent item number 2, the funds towards the Kings Beach Water Quality Improvement Project, be removed for further discussion, which we just saw, due to the fact that this project includes elements beyond just water quality that require further design consideration and alignment with the Tahoe Basin Area Plan. Overall, we ask that TRPA enact conditions on the water quality funding and the EIP permit that address the following: to ensure consistency with requirements for parking facilities or parallel parking per the TBAP, shift the alignment of paving along Brockway Vista Ave as far south as possible. This allows for the boardwalk to front commercial properties to the north and shift activity away from residential, allows for 13 to 15 feet of appropriate width for the future shared use path success. A northern boardwalk benefits not only from solar exposure, but allows greater year-round multimodal use, and then require a comprehensive operations and maintenance plan with clear responsibilities. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Alyssa. Any other members joining us virtually who wish to comment, Catherine?
No, Madam Chair, there are no other hands raised.
Okay, great. Then we will go ahead and close public comment on this item. In view of the comments by our chair, Cindy Gustafson, my recommendation would be that we defer action on this item and punt it to the governing board. So if there's kind of a general consensus, I don't think we have to take a motion on this item. We will simply not take action. Okay, all right. Thank you so much. And that brings us to agenda item number 5, which is the quarterly treasurer's report. Information on this item can be found on page 175 of your packet. This is an informational item only, and no committee action is required. Chris.
For the record, Chris Schuyler, Finance Director. If I have the only chart on this one, I put a longer treasurer's report in the package for you to read. The main thing, though, Brooke, for your question is there's an interesting thing going on where the market is restoring confidence in the banks as measured by the value of the stocks of the banks is going up, while at the same time deposits are declining. And
People are removing their capital.
people are moving the cash, but they think the reason is just that with interest rates increasing, it pays now to be more sharp with your money management.
Right.
And in the days when you were only getting 10 or 20 points return on a money market fund, it didn't make a lot of sense to move money back and forth between bank accounts and money market funds. Now that you're seeing interest rates in the 4.5% ratio, why leave your money in a low paying bank savings account when you can get it into something that'll make a lot more money?
Well, and small depositors are trying to get below that $250,000 insured mark.
Well, I mean, that there's still the nervousness on that is whether it's really 250,000 or anything like that. And certainly the biggest banks are the big winners. Chase is the big winner here because they're just getting tons of money because everybody's fleeing to Chase. So Chase picked up something like $10-20 billion worth of deposits.
Well, yeah.
So
Ability may be illusionary, but that's okay.
well, but it's it's hurting the mid-sized banks,
Yeah.
community banks. Those are the ones that people are leaving from. So our concern in terms of our investments is we do have a fair amount of money. I think the number's around 600,000 with Toronto Dominion Bank, which I never thought was being a part of this. The Canadian Banking Center was, a little staid and boring, but apparently it's the most shorted bank in North America at this point. The short is still only about 5% of their outstanding capital, but it's weird, but I'm not worried
Okay.
at this
All
point.
right. Okay. We've got that on the record, Chris.
Okay.
You're not worried.
I don't have any money in there. TRPA does, but I don't have money. Overall in treasuries, overall in the treasury report, I mean, where everything is within our treasury policy, no problems there. The one thing that's very different this month is you see that huge green bar on the ratings chart. And it's kind of a technical thing in here. Invite your comments as to what you want to see. I've been using S&P all along, the S&P ratings, and S&P does not rate the government treasuries. But for some reason, the principal group that we have our investments within now is slow to put in ratings for all their investments. So the Moody's, I have Moody's ratings for almost everything, but I only have S&P ratings for about half of the pool. So I switched this, so I'm just using the Moody's ratings, and Moody's rates treasuries, and they rate treasuries at AAA. And since we're heavily in the treasuries, we have this huge green bar on this chart because that's just all treasuries. We could take the treasuries out because they are the academic definition of low risk, however you may feel
Safe
about
havens,
things, given
yeah.
the current dog and pony show in Washington.
Next week, right?
But yeah, I don't know that it just swamps everything else. So you can't see that the rest of our stuff is all at least it's all investment grade. So we're all good.
Okay. All right, Chris, thank you. I wanted to, you and John Marshall and I discussed the securities that we hold for third parties and whether or not we should institute some sort of hold harmless provision when we accept these securities, because obviously those monies are invested, but we cannot guarantee their safety, especially during turbulent times in the market. Have you and John explored some sort of way to address that concern?
Yeah, most of the money we have is either in mitigation funds and securities. In the mitigation funds, we routinely report to the end recipients how much is there, and we only pay out what's there. So if we took a bath for something like that on mitigation funds, that would reduce funding available to the counties and to the land banks. On the securities, our problem is, I mean, that's a honest to God firm commitment. If they give us a $5,000 security, we're going to have to eat any loss and give them $5,000 back. We don't see any way out of that.
So there's no way of holding the agency harmless for things beyond its control with respect to the loss of those securities.
I will continue to follow up with John, but I think the
Okay.
answer is no. That
Yeah,
we're required to pay 100% of the security.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
We still have some very old securities that we're actually paying interest on. And at some point, we want to bring that back to you and for a suggestion that we at least stop accruing additional interest earnings on those securities. If not, eliminate the interest altogether.
Well,
There's not very many of them because we stopped paying interest, I think, in like 2015, 2004. I'm sorry, not 2015, 2004 or something like that. It's been a long time. So it's only the oldest of securities that we're still paying interest on. And these are the securities we have the hardest time releasing.
well, I mean, the past, they have been forfeited, right? I mean, the project was never completed, that the security was collected for. The owner of those securities can't be located. I know we have a process that we
Yeah, and
follow
we
to
continue.
determine whether or not we should actually abandon those securities, so to speak.
Yes, and we're continuing to work that process.
Okay.
And so, in fact, Catherine is the point person on that.
Okay, she's our point person.
We
Okay.
just took out ads and papers to
All right, okay.
to list some. So yeah, it'll eventually work off. And they're also doing other things, like if we have a subsequent permit for a piece of for a particular APN, particular property, when they go in to do the inspection on the current project, they'll bring the entire file up to date on
Okay.
that property. So it will serve as a de facto inspection for
Okay.
all the outstanding permits on the property.
Okay, and I suspect that some people forget they've had the security. The security was posted and that it's redeemable at some point when the property passes inspection.
We get a lot of very amusing responses when we reach out to people on this.
Is that right? Okay, you need to chronicle those. That would be kind of entertaining for the governing board to hear. Okay, all right. Yeah, thank you, Chris. Any questions or comments? Yes, go ahead, Vince.
Chris, I was just curious, because we had this problem with my company of something being over the insured amount. And so we split that between a couple different entities to try to get each one under that and just did some internal loaning and things like that. Is there any way we can do that? Because the Canadians are only insured up to 100,000.
Yeah,
There's a lot of money at risk.
the problem we have is what we do is every other week we do an AP run, and then in between weeks we do a payroll run. So our payroll run is roughly $500,000, between $500,000 and $600,000. Administratively, it'd be pretty difficult to break that up into different banks that was coming from. The AP run, it's as low as 400,000. It can be as high as $800,000 or $900,000. So from a process standpoint, I don't really want to do that. Right now, those accounts are with Wells, which seems to be one of the stronger banks right now. Chase is chasing us. They want us to give that business to them, which again, Chase is the #1 bank, something like, I just see something like 13% of all bank deposits are with Chase at this point. So they've got, 1/8 of the market.
And the problem is, the more depositors who transfer their money from their existing bank to Chase, I mean, that just weakens the bank that's losing those deposits. So we've had a good, my personal opinion is Wells is stable. We've had a good long-term relationship with them. So
Yeah, we'll look at Chase because we always want to make sure we got the best deal going. But what we have done, Vince, is we said, can we at least get those balances down below $1 million? Because what we do is we use LAIF fund, which is the California Treasurers Fund for Local Area Investment Fund, is literally the acronym. And I kind of use that as cash management. So when we get the big influx of cash at the beginning of the year from the states, we immediately transfer that into LAIF and it sits there. LAIF is effectively operated as a giant money market fund. And it is huge because it's collecting all this money from all the municipalities and all the departments in the state of California. So I don't remember off the top of my head, their investment portfolio is huge. It actually very closely mirrors ours in terms of maturities and types of investments they're making. But it's very secure there. It's not insured, but it's very secure. And then we just pull money into the Wells Fargo account as we need it, as we spend it during the course of the year. So we are trying to address it by keeping that balance down in the Wells Fargo account below $1 million. So it's a limited loss if we do lose something.
it's kind of a delicate balancing act, but. it
Yeah,
sounds
I
to
mean,
me like-
we could split the AP run up. Because AP is kind of split between people that we actually write a physical check to and people that are on ACH. We're trying to push more people onto ACH, but you can't really do security returns on ACH when you're just doing a transaction once every 5 years with somebody. But payroll would be hard to split.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, it sounds like to me like you have things well in hand, Chris. There's just so much you can do during uncertain times. So, but it sounds to me like we're doing what's prudent. So, any other comments or questions by members of the committee? Okay, seeing none, we will go to public comment on this item. So any member of the public who wishes to address the committee on this agenda item, please raise your hand now, either in person or by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you will be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Any member of the audience wishing to comment on this item, please come forward. Okay, no one's rushing to the podium, so I assume we have no one in the room wishing to comment on this item. Anyone joining us virtually who'd like to make a comment?
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to comment on this item.
Okay, thank you. Then we will go ahead and close public comment on this item. Again, this was an informational item only. That brings us to agenda item number 6, which is the briefing on the fiscal year 2023-24 annual budget. This also is for informational purposes only, and there will be no committee action on this item. Chris.
Again, Chris Kyler, Finance Director for the agency. I'm not yet in a position to talk about the overall scope of the budget and where we are right now. We're still in the process of building that out and finishing up the work plan for the presentation of the board next month. There are a couple of things that I would like to talk to you about. In terms of the revenue side, most of the variability comes from the fee stuff. And so we'll talk about fees a little bit. And our contracting effort has also gone up considerably, especially now that we're into LTRA funding. And I want to talk about that a little bit. If I could have the first chart, please. In terms of key assumptions, the Nevada budget is pretty well dialed in. Like I said, we're just really waiting on legislative action and the governor to sign off on the budget. We're not aware of any issues regarding the money that comes to us as a part of that budget. There's still some open issues on the bonds, but most of that money goes to other people. The California budget, the May revise is the same as the original February budget. They have not at this point touched the special funds that we get our money from. Our money in California comes from the Environmental License Plate Fund, which is healthy, and from the Harbors and Watercraft Revolving Fund. And there's efforts underway actually to make those funds even more healthy. So we're reasonably confident that the California contribution is pretty well bedded in. Buoy fees and permitting fees, what we'll talk about in just a minute. Other things, I am assuming about a 10% increase in our medical insurance premiums that will kick in January 1st, which is when our plans renew. We actually did better than that last year. I think our increase was only 7% last year. On the other benefit, on the other insurance lines like dental and vision and stuff like that, we had when we first switched to Anthem some years ago, we had an agreement that they froze the premiums for us for like 3 years. And that guarantee just went away. So we may see an increase in those other insurance lines. So I put in about a 6% inflation on those just in case. Won't really know what those increases will be until about October of this year. But this is just for budget purposes. This is the assumption I'm using. We can go to the next chart, please. Shoreline fees are actually fairly straightforward. We know what the existing buoys are, and people are going to pay their $43. The question mark is on new buoys, and so we've made some assumptions on that. We're not assuming a full take-up on available buoy permits this year, because last year we did not actually get permit requests for all the available buoys. We actually didn't have to have a lottery for that.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's on the mooring side, and that money just goes to run the actual buoy permitting program. So it runs the software and it pays for enforcement activities and outreach activities. The outreach has been ongoing. Enforcement, we're going to start picking up because now that we're into the program enough, people don't have the excuse that they haven't gotten their permit yet. We can go out and start looking at buoys.
Chris, I don't know if you can answer this question, but have most all of the buoys that were illegally placed off of publicly owned property been removed?
That was last year's initiative, was to take the ones that are off the parklands.
Have all of those been removed to your knowledge?
I don't know that I can actually directly answer that question unless you want.
Madam Chair, Julie Reagan, TRPA Executive Director. I wouldn't say all, but I would say a substantial number, and we do report on those numbers. I'm trying to remember But Steve Sweet could let us know. But yeah, a huge progress is underway.
Okay, great. Thank you. Go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
I thought that was the answer, but get it from a professional. The mitigation fee is a separate fee, and we don't have any projects currently scheduled to consume that money, so it's going into the bank for mitigation fees. And then the bottom block here is when you apply for a new buoy or for a new pier shoreline structure, that's a planning activity, not a shoreline activity. So that revenue goes into the planning fund that we'll talk about just in a minute. And so they made some estimates, the shoreline crew, in terms of how many applications they're anticipating getting and what the revenues that will come from that. And it's not just the base fee, it also includes the added fees. You want a new permit, you're gonna have to get a B&P certificate, and there's a fee for that. And administrative fees like our IT fee. So this stuff I think is fairly straightforward. The next chart, I'm going to call work in process. Next chart, please. We're still working through this, but I wanted to kind of show you methodology. We're kind of like looking at it from a couple of different angles. I look at what the 5-year average is. And as I indicated earlier, that's been growing dramatically the last few years. I take the current year to date, and this would have been year to date March, and extrapolate out, and that gives a rough number. Then you take that number and kind of, we've been doing an annual inflation escalation in our planning fees. So just at the time I was looking at this, it looked like the inflation rate was going to be about 6.2%. So we're going to assume a 6.2% increase in planning fees that would be implemented the end of January is when we normally do that. And then I started making some adjustments for things like the shoreline forecast, because we are expecting a lot of new permits applications in the shoreline things. In fact, they just opened the permit window for piers, right? So those will be coming in. I don't think this is final yet. I still have to sit down with the planning and enforcement team to go over this, but it looks like the added revenue from shoreline is going to offset some of the decline that we're seeing in the base planning fees. So we may still wind up with a planning fee forecast that's a little bit higher next year than this year. But it'll be a different mix between the traditional planning activities and the new piers and the new buoy requests. This one, I gotta say again, it's not bedded down, but we're looking at this. The other thing, the other caveat on there, I'll tell you, is there's a number of major projects that are activity going around there. If we wind up doing a master plan revision on Homewood, if something starts coming in on Calneva, we could have a major project come in that would be a pretty substantial change in fees, upward change in fees. But we just don't know exactly where we are on that stuff just yet. And I'm not inclined to take too big of a risk on that if we have to. Contracting, next chart, please. Huge impact from LTRA and stuff. We were traditionally roughly 50-50 in labor and contracting as an agency, and that's just completely changed and shifted. And this is LTRA funds and stuff like that. This cut just kind of shows you by the different funding sources between our general fund, the grants and the fees. And you can see that huge lump there in the grants, and it's almost all up in environmental improvement. And that's almost entirely AIS and LTRA related things. On the fee side, the big chunk in environmental improvement reflects the buoy inspection, or not the buoy, the watercraft inspection fees. That's covering things like our contract with TRCD to actually operate the stations are covered by those fees. And down in planning and code enforcement, then a lot of that is outsourced review stuff. But we also keep a placeholder in there about $150,000 for things that we are indemnified by the applicant for. So if we have a challenge to a permit and there's litigation, there's the applicant pays. If we have to do a major EIR, EIS or something like that, the applicant would pay. So that's flow through money. It's a rough estimate of 150, but revenue and expenses go up and down together. So it's not really a fiscal risk to the agency. So it's kind of an interesting cut by area and by funding source. Normally, what I like to do is I like to show you all the major contracts. And in the past, I've shown you all the contracts over $50,000. This year, I couldn't possibly fit those on a single sheet of paper. So the cutoff on this next chart is $250,000. And could I have the next chart, please? And there's two things on here that immediately draw my attention. And the first is, this is 14 contracts that we're proposing that will have about $250,000. And only 4 of those are with private entities. This really kind of illustrates the collaborative nature of what we're doing and how we're doing, because the other 10 contracts are all going to partner agencies inside the basin, people that we work with on all these different projects. And the second part on here is obviously almost all of this is LTRA and AIS stuff. So it's a pretty impressive amount of funding that Julie managed to get for us for all those years she put into getting LTRA shoved through Congress. And better yet, getting it funded as well as authorized. And I guess the news is they just introduced the next round, right? I'm not going to talk about that. But, and that's pretty much all I had on this for right now. Again, the fee related one there is the TRCD contract for operating the stations. And it's strange for us now that the monitoring contracts, the only one that made this cut was the UC Davis contract for atmospheric depth, Secchi dish measurements and all that stuff.
If I could add to that, thank you, Chris. Julie Reagan here. Just to build on the takeaway, I think from this chart, it really emphasizes also our expertise in finance to be the fiscal agent for so many of the important programs that are funded through Congress. And we've developed this track record over the last 20 years of being able to deploy capital from either the federal government, the state government, our partners, to efficiently get that money onto restoration projects. And it's grown over time as our expertise and the team that Chris and Kathy lead, they do an amazing job. And it's really complicated with the deliverables and the requirements and understanding all the various requirements, not just federal money, but we're talking the difference between Department of Interior, Department of Agriculture, BLM, like all of these different agencies have very rigorous reporting requirements, and we take it really seriously. So just wanted to add that, but I think it's really a testament to the role that we play in the compact to have that collaborative framework in the basin.
Well, I think the agency, has tremendous credibility, and that's certainly a tribute to the hard work of staff.
I also want to say that we've prepared for this. We've actually added staff. We've added a head in Meyer and a head in Kim's area to make sure that we can manage these contracts and stuff like that. I am a little concerned about the ability of the receivers to actually spend the money. So we may want to look at this and decrement some of these a little bit, because it is a big chunk of change. It's floating around.
You mean not having the personnel to execute properly, or not having the expertise to execute properly?
Well, I mean, they're going to have to then manage their project. They're going to have to do these projects and get the cash out there and get the money out there with the subrecipients and the contractors that'll be doing the work.
So what is the extent of our involvement in monitoring the progress of these projects to ensure that they are not lagging behind?
It's standard contract management, project management. Yes, because
but I mean,
they bill us, we bill the
sure
funder, so we are responsible for making sure.
So if they're not submitting, invoices for reimbursement, I mean, is that a red flag? Is that prompt some conversation with the recipients about, the timeliness of their work to get these projects completed?
Good morning, Kim Chevalier for the record. All of these
let me turn off my.
Okay, step back. All of these projects are environmental improvement program partners, and these are projects that have been vetted through committees and are basically already in implementation. So I would say, I think all of these are going to be able to spend this money fairly quickly, honestly, on some of these projects that have been kind of waiting in the wings for a while. So this money that we've been granted through LTBMU and LTRA is really going to help us advance some of this EIP work this summer and next summer, the next couple of years. So we're always looking to improve capacity, but as far as managing the contracts, we have staff in the EIP department that are working with each of these project managers to ensure the invoices are coming, that the work is happening. We'll have to report that back to LTBMU. So we have standard reporting reports in place for all of the projects that will happen.
Okay, Kim, I appreciate that. I mean, obviously, it reflects poorly on us as the recipient of those funds, even though we're acting in a pass-through capacity if the projects are not moving forward, in a timely manner, and if the money is not being properly spent. So I appreciate you, your oversight to ensure that everything is going according to plan. Okay, all right. Thank you. Chris, anything else?
No, with that, unless somebody has questions, or I'd be delighted to get any feedback you might have in terms of our approach and stuff like that. The plan is to bring a final budget to you next month along with the work plan.
Okay, all right. Any further questions or comments by members of the committee on this item? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to public comment on this item. If any member of the public wishes to address the Operations and Governance Committee on this agenda item, please raise your hand now, either in person or by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you will be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Any member joining us in person who wishes to comment on this item? Okay, seeing again, no one rushing to the podium. We will move on to anyone who might want to comment virtually. Catherine?
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to comment on this item.
Okay, all right, great. Then we will go ahead and close public comment on this item and move on to agenda item number 7, upcoming topics. Chris.
Okay, last item. There's really only 2 things on here. Next chart, please. As I indicated earlier, we'll be bringing the budget back, so we'll try to clear as much off the ops committee calendar for next month as possible so we can deal with budget issues. Then the other thing is it's about time for us to start our interim audit. So there may be some communications to you as members of the audit committee of the agency, where they send out the scary letter saying that we're here. And do you know of any cases of improper conduct or something that you want, or you certainly had the opportunity to reach out and speak directly to the auditors on anything that may be concerning you. So that letter also kind of outlines what their audit is, to avoid any confusion as to what they really are looking at and what they aren't looking at. So that'll be coming out shortly.
Okay,
A final audit will be in October, and then we are scheduled to bring the final audited financial statements to you for acceptance in December.
okay, all right. Thank you for that heads up. Anything to report? All the improvements or repairs to the roof have been completed, I assume? All the leaks addressed?
2 rounds of leaks, because after they finished putting the roof on, we got all the snow load. We brought the roof contractor in to shovel all the snow off the road, and they scraped the surface and they damaged the roof. Yeah. But they fixed all that. So I think the roof is now in pretty good shape. Sorry, I forgot. I meant to include a chart on that. We spent about half of the $500,000. We'll probably spend another $50,000 on a couple of items like doing a parking lot overlay and things like that. The big open item is the retaining walls.
Right.
And our problem right now is when we first started this project, we thought it would be about $150,000 to restack the boulders. A couple months later, the contractor came in and looked and said, well, some of these boulders are starting to degrade. We're gonna have to replace them. And it became a $250,000 project. And then when we started talking to Douglas County about the design and stuff, they said, well, you got to get an engineer, you got to have an engineering study done. And they immediately hit us with, okay, you can only do stacked boulders up to a height of 8 feet. And the portion of the retaining wall that we're most concerned about is where it intersects with the building, and that's probably around 16 to 20 feet. So now we have a whole different project on our hands. We did an RFP. We got one proposal for $800,000. So we're going to have to revisit what we're going to do there and come up with a plan that gets us back down into a reasonable level that we can afford to do.
So, okay, we have gabion walls, right? Gabions along the highways. And those rocks are stacked above 8 feet. Now, I know it won't be terribly attractive, but we might be able to cover the metal with vegetation of some sort. I mean, would that be an option? If it's good enough to stabilize the eroding banks along the highway, I would think would be good enough to stabilize our retaining wall.
Yeah, the actual RFP we did was not for a contractor to do the work. We did an RFP for an engineer to design and work with the contractor. So we're waiting on them to give us ideas. The cheapest idea they've come up with so far was to drive rebar into the slope, put in, I call it chicken wire, but it's obviously not chicken wire. It's something more robust like chain link, and then spray concrete on the top of it. ugly, but those aren't really visible walls, and that was the cheapest option.
Why would you need to spray concrete if it's
That's what
reinforced with metal?
stabilizes. It's really the concrete. that
It's
stabilizes.
not the
It
chicken
prevents
wire,
leakage.
so to
Yeah.
speak.
Well, the chicken wire holds the rocks in place, and the rock is the base for the cement.
Well, how about stabilizing with vegetation?
It's too steep, I think.
Okay,
One of the engineers wants to build a regular retaining wall, the real retaining wall. The problem is there's a requirement that it has a slope to it. And that would then eat into the parking spaces in the upper parking lot. So we'd lose parking spaces if we do that. The other problem with that is we think the tab would probably be more like $1.5 million, which is, I can't afford $800,000. I can't afford anything.
okay,
more
so
than that.
if we're putting aesthetics aside, how about sheet metal? Driving sheet metal. I mean, seriously.
To be honest, yeah. To be honest, my thought is let's deal with the most threatening part, the part of the wall closest to the building. Because separately, on the second level, there's a drain that runs across. There's a big roll-up door that gives you access to the second level of the building. There's a drain across there and it's completely deteriorated because it's like 40 years old. So the concrete's all chipped and broken up. The asphalt's all chipped and broken out. And I want to replace that. But when we brought a contractor in to look at that, he looked at that, he looked at the rock wall and he said, I'm not doing anything until you fix that rock wall. So I'm thinking we'll just de-scope the project and just deal with the most dangerous portion of the retaining wall. So we
Okay.
can do with the money available. As it is, we're gonna have to dig into reserves, dip into reserves in order to do this. We're not gonna be able to do it.
I really think you just contact NDOT and have them do the work for us. I mean, you've got all of these embankments along the highway that are secure.
Yeah, you're thinking about 50 where you literally have kind of little
Yeah,
stairs stepped up.
right.
I don't know if
Yeah,
that's
it's all
planted
gated,
vegetation or
something.
just natural weeds. but-
Right, that's okay, that's all right, it's natural. Anyway, okay, so more to come.
A lot more to come.
All right, thank you, Chris, I appreciate that. Any comments or questions for Chris on upcoming topics? All right, then we will move on to public comment on this item. If any member of the public wishes to address the Operations and Governance Committee on this agenda item, please raise your hand now, either in person or by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you will be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Any member of the public joining us here in person wish to comment on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to any virtual comments.
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to comment on this item.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Then we will close public comment. We're now on agenda item number 8, committee member comments. Any member of the committee wish to comment before we adjourn this meeting? Okay, seeing none, then we will move on to our final general public comment period. If any member of the public wishes to address the Operations and Governance Committee on this item, please raise your hand now, or not on this item, but at this time, please raise your hand now, either in person or by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you will be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Any members of the public joining us in person wishing to comment on any item not discussed during this meeting of the Operations and Governance Committee? Okay, I see none. Any member joining us virtually? Catherine?
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to comment at
Okay.
this time.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. The Regional Plan Implementation Committee will follow in 5 minutes. In 5 minutes in this room and on this link. Thank you, everyone.